No?
All right, you're ready, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, or late afternoon, I guess, since we're starting early for a work session. It is January 19th, 2021. Before we call our meeting to order, I believe Councilmember Hens is going to offer a word of prayer.
If you'll pray with me. Father, we push pause in the day and the craziness and the chaos that's going on around us with the virus and with all the politics and all the mess, and we just push pause. And we say that we trust you. We want to do good by Nacogdoches. We want to make wise decisions. We want to move forward in a way that makes you proud, in a way that sets us up to have the community that this could and should be. And so even now we speak peace over the families that have lost friends, that have lost loved ones to COVID this year. I know it's been a hard year. And so we speak peace, we speak rest, we speak hope over them. And Lord, I ask that you would give us favor tonight and wisdom. We love you and we trust you. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you. I will now call our meeting to order of January 19th, 2021. And I would ask that the council members that are in council chambers please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God,
Under
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And our agenda item number 3 is our work session. Our first work session, we will receive a report, hold a discussion, and give staff direction regarding notification requirements for zone change applications. And I would like to ask our city secretary if there is anyone there or joining us that would like to make a public comment about this item.
Pat Costello.
All right. So,
Oh,
Mrs.
I'm sorry,
Costello.
Mayor. We have one other, Mr. Blackburn.
Okay, great. So will Mrs. Costello be first?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, well, let's hear from her first.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you for all that you do, thanklessly at most times. And I wasn't totally aware that this was happening to just a few minutes ago. And so I'm not quite sure what you are discussing, but I would have, and you've probably read it a million times by now, 2 suggestions for when you plan a change of zoning in the city of Nacogdoches. And the one suggestion is the letter that is sent to the 200-foot abutters in other cities where I've worked with zoning also included, and forgive me if I'm giving you the wrong one, there's a rule that states if X amount of the people receiving the letter object to it, they can send a written document to the city, and that then changed the voting structure. And that really should be included in the 200-foot abutter letter, because it gives, there's no way they know that. People don't really understand zoning, and they really don't get excited about it till it's all over. So that gives them a heads up, the 200-foot abutters, that they have the right to, not agree, and they send a letter here, and based on the percentages, and that gives them a different vote, supermajority, whatever. The next thing that cities that I have been to do, and it really cuts down on what you're dealing with now from all of us, is they post a sign in front of the property stating, there has been a request for rezoning at this house from blah, blah to blah, blah. And that way, everyone knows what is going on. Yes, under the law, you send the 200-foot abutter letter, and under the law, the letter you send is minimum. It did not it did not include the rule for the 200-foot abutters, you know, to complain. You should put that in there with an envelope to go back to the city. The only other warning you give is a little thing in the newspaper, which a lot of people don't see. So by posting a sign, no matter who's asking to be rezoned, no matter what level of zoning, you have given the citizens adequate warning as to what is happening. And that's a suggestion I would make.
Thank you very much, Pat. Mr. Blackburn?
Again, thanks for everything that you're doing for the community. The one thing that I would add to the process is a mechanism for appeal. I know there's a lot of zone changing that goes on, and I would imagine that 99.9% of them go off without a hitch. But for those cases where there's something that's happened that, you know, needs to be looked at again, there should be some built-in mechanism for appeal. I know some municipalities have a process where if there is a zone change, it doesn't take effect until so many days after the ruling, after the vote. And during that window of time, someone can put together a petition or whatever. You can look and see what other municipalities do. But there is a window of time there where the zone change can be challenged. And I think that would be helpful. I think the last thing that you want to do is make a zone change that infuriates a whole neighborhood. That is not good for our community. It's a small community. I think having this mechanism for appeal would be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Philip. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak?
That's all I have, Mayor.
Okay, thank you very much. And so now I believe we will hear from Elena Chapin, our city planner.
All right. Good evening, Council. Elena Chapin, City Planner. Thank you. This evening, we're going to be talking about notification requirements for public hearings as they relate to planning applications such as zone change requests, plan development districts, and specific use permits. Included in this presentation is an overview of the zoning ordinance and the statutory regulations governing these types of notices, as well as some research from other Texas communities and their noticing practices. Okay, thank you. The city zoning ordinance outlines the processes and procedures which the city must follow in modifying the boundaries of a zoning district. Section 118-132, outlined on your screen, describes the notices the cities must comply with as part of the public hearing process for zone changes. And I'm not going to read all of the text verbatim, but I just wanted to highlight the sections that are underlined and bolded. In processing a zoning application, 2 public hearings are held. The first of these is held by the Planning and Zoning Commission, where they review the request and then make a recommendation to City Council. The second public hearing is held by City Council, where they make the final determination for approval or denial of the request. 10 days prior to the Planning and Zoning Commission hearing, the property owners that are located within 200 feet of the subject property are notified by mail of the meeting and their right to appear and express their opinion about the request. 15 days prior to the City Council public hearing, we publish a legal advertisement in the local newspaper with information regarding the request, including time and location of both of the public hearings. These public hearings provide an opportunity for proponents or opponents to voice their concerns and opinions of the proposed change in question. The city's authority to regulate land use and zoning is granted by the state of Texas, as outlined in the Texas Local Government Code, Chapter 211.006, titled Procedures Governing Adoption of Zoning Regulations and District Boundaries. And I just wanted to include this text to illustrate that the language found in our zoning ordinance is essentially verbatim what's outlined in the Local Government Code. We just adopted those as our own regulations. The significance of the 200-foot mail notice is that these property owners have legal standing when it comes to opposition or protest of a zoning request. This means that in the case of a zone change, when a written protest is filed with the city by 20% or more of the property owners within the 200-foot notification area, it requires the affirmative vote of at least 3/4 of the city council to approve the proposed change. And this includes all the adjacent property and surrounding property. And when you're calculating the 20% of the land area, they also include streets and alleys. So in conducting research on notification practices of other Texas communities, we found that other cities that provided public notices that were above the minimum standard usually included a courtesy mail notice to property owners beyond the 200-foot buffer requirement, and those varied from city to city. They also included courtesy letters to homeowners associations or neighborhood associations that were registered with the city in that area. They included physical property signs located on the property along the street frontage to inform nearby residents. They also included additional online and social media postings about the public meetings. And they also included neighborhood meetings where the applicant and staff would meet with the neighborhood and make a presentation about the request. So this chart illustrates a comparison of Nacogdoches public notice practices and how they relate to the other Texas communities that we just discussed. The row with the check marks indicates the other cities that have the same 200-foot mail notice that the city of Nacogdoches has, as outlined by the state local government code. Huntsville, San Marcos, and Austin have codified by ordinance the expansion of that 200-foot mail notice, and with the exception of Austin, these additional property owners are included in that 20% threshold for written protest of the proposed change. For the city of Austin, they send those mailed notices, but only the people within 200 feet have the standing to submit the written protest. The others are just courtesy notices. Denton, Missouri City, and Plano provide a courtesy notice to property owners beyond the 200-foot notification as well, but it's by practice. It's not codified in their ordinances. And these range from 250 to 500 feet. Several other cities also send mail notices to, like I said, homeowners associations or neighborhood associations. These cities also have a HOA or neighborhood association registration that they maintain with the city, and they collect and maintain that data over time. Other cities, like I said, post physical signs on the property. Some cities require the applicant to pay for and post the physical sign, and then some other cities just incorporate it into their application fee, and they do that process. San Marcos was the only city listed that actually requires a neighborhood meeting prior to the application submittal for a zone change request. A lot of the other cities highly recommend it, but it's not dictated by the code before they actually submit an application. Oh, and the city of Austin also notifies environmental agencies that might be within that area or utility companies who might have utilities in that area, and they also have a registration that they maintain that contact information. So here we've included an example of what a courtesy postcard notice might look like. This is from the city of Denton, and this type of notice is sent to property owners outside the 200-foot mailed notice area, but within 500 feet of the subject property that's requesting the zone change. You'll notice at the top right, they put a project number and a project name for reference. In the top left, they put the location, date, and time of the meeting, followed by a short description of the request and the project. And then they have an invitation that specifically invites those people who receive the request to attend the meeting and make their concerns and views known. And then they provide some additional contact information with phone number and website for people who want to request additional information. In this slide, we've shown you some examples of some property signs that are posted on the subject properties that are requesting a zone change. They provide additional information for the surrounding residents in the immediate area, and the level of information on these signs varies. For some signs, it's literally just city contact information and a case number for someone to call and request information on that case. Some of them are very detailed, and so you can see as they range. The one on the right-hand side in the right-hand corner is very detailed. It has the actual request, the applicant name, and then the others are just simply the case number. So in conclusion, we did present this item to the Planning and Zoning Commission on December 14th, and all of the commissioners generally supported all of these same measures that we presented. They did want to ensure that if we do increase that mailed notification area beyond the 200 feet, that we're careful to make the distinction between communicating that the property owners within 200 feet have that standing for written protest, and then the ones that are beyond that would just be for courtesy. So I just want to make sure that they make that distinction to eliminate any kind of confusion that people might have whenever they receive these types of notices. And with that, that concludes our presentation. And so we are looking for staff direction, or sorry, for council direction as far as maintaining our current notice practices or adopting any number of these additional items, including courtesy mail notice beyond 200 feet up to 500, HOA letters if we have that information on file, property signs, online and social media postings, and neighborhood meetings. But these would be a recommendation. They wouldn't be dictated. That would require a code amendment, and these could be implemented as early as March 1st of this year. So with that, I'll open it up for any questions from the council.
Okay, thank you very much, Elena. Let's see. So, Mr. Bolden, would you like to start?
Yes, ma'am. First of all, it is my belief that 200 feet is not nearly enough notification area. And you mentioned that it was a courtesy to go beyond the 200 feet?
Yes, sir. For some cities, they've actually adopted it in their code as a.
Nacogdoches. Let's just talk about it.
mandate. Oh, okay, yes, yes. Yes, if we were to send mailed notices beyond the 200-foot requirement, we could do it as a courtesy notice and let people know, hey, there's an application in your area. Here's the time and date of the public meetings. You're invited to come and express your opinions, or the city council could move forward and ask staff to introduce an ordinance amendment that would require that by code, and even possibly include those additional people within that area where people have standing that meets the 20% threshold for the written protest. And so there's a couple different options.
So the courtesy does not include the ability to appeal the board decision. Is that what you're stating?
The courtesy notice, those people that received the courtesy notice would be invited to attend, but they wouldn't have the standing to submit a written protest to count towards the 20% that would trigger the supermajority vote by council to approve the zone change. Yes, sir.
Thank you, but I have a problem with that too. But one of the things that Ms. Costello, and I was referring to an article that was on the website from the state. While local governments and zoning boards are generally in control of zoning, the people in the community themselves have some power over zoning as well. For example, if an individual wants to do something that his or her home is not zoned for, such as running home business in a residential area, in most cases, she is able to get an exception to the zoning law as long as the local board and his and her neighbors agree. She may be required to get all his or her neighbors to sign something permitting the exception and allowing him and her to open the business before a board vote on the request. We don't have that in our repertoire, do we?
I don't believe so. No, that doesn't sound familiar.
Yeah. Would you like to see that in our?
Well, it sounds almost like a specific use permit, but without the site plan component. So you're just keeping the zoning the same, but approving this additional use that would normally be permitted in that zoning district. So I don't think it would be a far stretch, but they're calling it an exception versus a specific use permit. That's definitely something that staff could research further and then bring back to City Council with some more information on what that would look like.
I would appreciate that.
Okay.
Well, thank you.
Okay, Garth Hens.
Thank you for the presentation. I'm curious, just trying to parse through which of these would be codified and required versus those that would just be courtesy. So if I can run through them just to make sure I'm understanding correctly. The letters would be courtesy, HOA letters would be courtesy if there's an HOA involved. Property signs would be required, or is that also a courtesy?
All of these items could be courtesy, meaning we just incorporate them into our policies and our practices, but they're not incorporated into the actual zoning ordinance or vice versa. These could also be codified and mandated in our zoning ordinance.
Got it. So we would internally have a process for each one of these where we would, if it's applicable, we would be on the hook for doing each one of those. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Got it. Okay. So then on the social media, what does that mean? Is that just the city website, or is that hunting down HOA websites and any other applicable? Or what does that look like?
It would be on the city website, and so it would be on the planning and zoning webpage itself. Some cities provide a notice on the planning webpage as well as the city homepage, so upcoming meetings. And then oftentimes they'll post information about these meetings on the city social media websites like the Facebook and the Instagram and some of those other platforms. And oftentimes some of the other cities that we looked at had a email registration where the general public could sign up for just general meeting notifications. So anytime there was a public meeting, anytime there was like a planning application, they would get pushed an email notifying them of those upcoming applications and procedures. Same thing with HOAs and neighborhood associations. Cities invite those organizations to register with them to receive automatic information and updates, not just for public meetings, but other things as well. And so those are things that we could implement. Now, we don't have a inventory of registered HOAs within the community because some of our neighborhoods have been established for a very long time, and the neighborhood associations aren't active or they're not formal. But that's something that we could start to build as part of this process and encourage people to reach out and provide their contact information.
That makes sense. I do like the signs. It seems, I agree with Ms. Costello, it seems like that would be a pretty easy way for those that live in the neighborhood and are involved and are out, whether they're walking or driving or riding their bikes or whatever. It just seems like it'd be hard to miss if we had specifications lined out appropriately. The bandit signs I think would look pretty trashy, and if you have high grass, those are going to be covered over pretty readily. So just some thought there. I'm sure you would do a great job, but that would be my only concern with
Okay.
that. Awesome, thank you.
Okay, Jay Anderson.
Yeah, I'd like to say, first of all, I like the idea of potentially expanding the radius from properties for notification for zoning changes. I guess my question is maybe for you and for Mr. Davis a little bit as well. Is there precedent for historical overlays having different standards of notification or being treated similarly to an HOA, either within, for zoning changes proposed either within or within a certain proximity of the overlay?
Yeah, so one city that we looked at in their ordinances actually stated that if you had a zone change request that was included in historic overlay district, then that request also had to go before the Historic Landmark Commission or whatever name that they had for that. That was the first step. And so you had to go to the Historic Landmark Commission and then the Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council. And then, basically the way that we process historic overlay, it is a zone change. And so when we get those requests, we treat them just like any other zone change request, but first they go to that Historic Landmark Commission. So I guess there is, based on the research, there is there are scenarios where if it's in a historic overlay, then there is a recommendation that's provided by that committee.
Okay, but no differences in notification requirements as far as distance?
No, I didn't see any of that.
Okay.
No.
Just out of curiosity, those are my questions. Thank
Okay.
you.
Amelia Fisher.
Yes, Mayor, thank you. Okay, thank you so much, Elena, for the presentation and for coming up with this. It sounds like what I hope to be the case, which is that we are shifting more toward a community engagement model versus just doing what's minimally legally required. And so I am in favor of all of the additional notice practices, not as a courtesy. I would actually like to see it as an ordinance amendment and codified so that when all of us are gone, this still continues to be respected. I Also, like I said, I'm good with all of them. I think the signs will go a long way. I would ask that I think the neighborhood meetings is a really good idea just because, if we put it in the Daily Sentinel distributes twice, 3 times a week now. And so that might not be timely or somebody might not have gotten it. I think that social media posting and online posting isn't necessarily equitable distribution of information. And so I think physical sign posting is really important. I like the neighborhood meetings for the same idea, for the same reason, because if someone doesn't get the Daily Sentinel or doesn't have access to internet at home, then they'll see a sign and they'll have an opportunity to make their voice heard a different way. I also, something that's not included in this, but that I've heard about and mentioned, I would like for you guys to explore the idea of doing a second reading of the zoning change. And so, as opposed to a one and done, obviously what I'm saying, having a second reading of it. I think that that's similar to, but different from the appeal process, maybe less adversarial and sort of achieves the same result. I would hope it gives people two opportunities. And the other thing I would add is something that Ms. Costello mentioned about making explicit in the notices, if you've got 20% opposition, then it requires 3/4 of the council to vote. I think that that's an important point that might sound like blah, 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 but I think it actually makes people realize that their voice actually can have an effect on the outcome of the process. So I would appreciate looking into making that part explicit in the notices. And Councilmember Anderson asked a question about if there are different procedural safeguards for historic overlays. And I would also like to see some information on that, on whether there are and what that could look like in Nacogdoches.
Okay.
Okay.
I threw a lot at you, I'm sorry. Did that all make sense?
Yes, yes. And at the conclusion of the discussion, I'll ask council some follow-up questions just to make sure that I'm understanding the direction that we're receiving, and you can confirm, yes, I want you to move forward with this, but I'll wait till the end.
Okay.
Thank you, Elena.
So I agree with most of what everyone said. I do want to add a little bit to what Amelia mentioned about codifying portions of this. I agree that they should be codified. However, I don't think it's something we should try to do by March. I think it would be important to to sort of live with it and work with it, and let's have the courtesy parts of it, and let's see how it works and get that going as soon as we can, and then revisit it in about 6 months as an outside, so that yes, the majority of the people that are here would still be on the council, and then we would look at codification then, because I just have a feeling that sometimes when you rush into something like that, you realize that, we really should expand this a little bit more, or we really didn't need to do this part at this time. So what I would like to see is for you to expand this list to be a little more detailed, so that we've got, up to, and we can set, I'm fine with up to 500 feet. I think it's real interesting as neighborhoods get older. It seems that many of those residences become rental property. And so I really think, I like the idea of having the courtesy notices, and I like the postcards. I know that saves a little bit of money, on postage. But I think that's important. HOA, I happen to live in an HOA, and I think that, it's also a good idea, as you mentioned, Elena, for the future to really start cataloging those and seeing where those are.
Okay.
And I like the signs, and we could see something that, just expand on this a little bit so we see a sample of what we're looking at and talking about. Does anyone want to, well, I'll tell you what, let's let Elena ask her questions and we'll get some more definitive answers. So go ahead, Elena.
Okay, so all of these recommendations or practices included expanded mail notices, but those were just for property owners. And Madam Mayor, I heard you talk about, properties that are rental. Are you saying that you would be interested in including residents as well that aren't necessarily property owners but are renting those homes in that?
No. I think that because I think doesn't the law, I mean, it's for property owners. I just think that if you have, you can have a piece of property and it can be bridged on either side by rental property and beyond 200 feet, then and it could be an absent landlord. It could be somebody that lives somewhere else and it really isn't engaged. So that's why I'm also for the courtesy notices up to, to be extended because of that reason, to include more property, actual
Okay.
property.
But it would just be the property owners, correct? Not the residents that are the physical addresses necessarily.
Well, what does if you are a renter, you do not have a vote in that 20%, correct?
No, ma'am. That is correct.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. So,
I have one thing to say about
Yes.
that. I understand the purpose of restricting it to property owners, and certainly the purpose of the 20% 3/4 rule being restricted to property owners. But some people are really longtime renters, and in my view, it's their neighborhood, and they should at least have a say in coming to council and explaining how they feel about a particular zone change, particularly when, as the mayor mentioned, we do have absent property owners. I mean, sometimes absent, living in another state, who really couldn't care less what happens within the neighborhood. And in that instance, for example, I'm going to care more about what the person who is living there, has those neighbors there every day, and is experiencing life in that neighborhood, what that person has to say, versus someone who lives in Virginia and really doesn't care at all what happens in that neighborhood. And so I'm not advocating for any sort of say in terms of requiring a 3/4 vote on city council, but I don't think that we should write off notices to renters just like that, or at the very least, and this is something that you've incorporated in your presentations, Elena, letting us know, well, in this list of people that we sent, these property owners don't actually live in the residence, because I think that distinction matters.
okay.
So when that's done, do you
question.
send a letter to the property owner and then you just send a letter to occupant at that address?
And that's where I have a problem with this. I mean, let's not add difficulty to this situation. We should only send letters to the property owners. I look at that as being a legal aspect to appeals, and we send out information to renters. There's much more of a legal process if we don't actually have the property owner themselves giving an opinion or vote or whatever.
Garth or Jack, you have a thought on this?
I would tend to agree, especially if we are going to be placing physical signage on the property in question. To me, that provides sufficient notice for people who actually live in the neighborhood, and beyond that, I would tend towards sending notices specifically to property owners.
Okay. And Garth?
I like what you mentioned about putting these in practice, March 1st, and then some 6 months down the road, reviewing whether or not we want to codify those. Because candidly, I just don't know. There's always going to be unintended consequences. One of the unintended consequences for us having the practices we currently have, we're seeing that play out right now. And then as each of these are implemented, there's going to be unintended consequences there too. So certainly we don't want people to be blindsided. We also don't want to be known as a community that is anti-development. So there's this interesting tension that we've got to walk, and I don't know enough about what some of these anticipated consequences would be.
Mm-hmm.
I do like each one of these things. I think the signs make sense. I think expanding to 500 feet absolutely makes sense. I'm not a huge social media guy, but maybe there's people that would be looking for that kind of thing on social media. My gut says not a ton, but I don't know. It seems like the signs
I
and
feel
the
like the
mailers.
signage is going to really be more effective for the people who actually reside in the neighborhood.
And Garth, what is your opinion on the courtesy mailed notices going to renters versus in addition to property owners?
I see the heart behind it. I don't know anything about the legal standing behind it or what other communities do, if that would be the first community in Texas to do that, if that causes extra headaches, or if that logistically creates 10 times more letters that go out in some circumstance. I really don't know.
I didn't find a community that sent notifications directly to residents. The closest I could find were courtesy notices that went to established or registered HOAs or neighborhood associations, because they usually distribute that information out to their residents. That was the closest thing I could find to actually notifying the residents of the community versus the property owners.
I think
But with respect to Ms. Fisher, I would suggest that we leave that off for this at this present time, but we look into it a little bit more, because we can always add it. But it seems to me we all have some additional questions that we may need to look at.
Yeah, and that's fine. I agree with what Jay said, that the physical signage would have the same effect that we would want a courtesy letter to renters to have. So I'm fine with that.
Okay, great. So Elena, what other questions do you have?
So was everyone on the same page as far as the distance of the expansion to 500 feet for the additional courtesy notices, keeping the people withstanding at 200 and then expanding the courtesy to 500 for now, and then reevaluating in 6 months to see if we want to codify any of these changes? Okay.
I'm okay with that. And everybody else okay?
One other thing, if I could ask you just to check into, is if with historical overlays, if there is a precedent anywhere for sending notifications to everyone within that overlay.
Okay. For the entire overlay district?
Yes. Since it will tend to, zoning changes will tend to affect everything within the various overlays.
Okay, the only other item I need clarification on, and it was something that Ms. Costello mentioned, was the 2 readings by council. No, that would have to be codified, but is that something that you would like me to do additional research on? I have worked for a couple of Texas communities who had the 2 meetings. The first council meeting was the actual public hearing and discussion and presentation, and they approved the zone change, and then the next reading was the actual adoption of the ordinance. And so that could be a similar process here, and I could bring back some more information, but we wouldn't be able to adopt that by policy. It would have to be codified into the actual ordinance.
Well, I am fine with that, but I don't know that we should move to codify it at this, well, I guess we'd have to in order to have a second reading.
Try it, yeah.
So,
Well,
okay.
And Madam Mayor,
Yes,
I'm sorry, I was gonna tell you, if you like, I can bring back some more specific examples of what some of these letters might look like, what the signs might look like, what some of these various updated policies would actually, how they would read, and present them, like bring them back and present them to you, allow you to think on it a little bit more, and then we could reevaluate it then.
perfect.
So, like, some of these we could implement today or next week, and then as we do that, we'll go ahead and let you know what those forms look like, and then we can come back later and provide some additional information on some of the things that Councilman Anderson requested, information on the second readings and what that might look like, if that's something that would be amenable to the council.
So when you say implement next week, what do you?
Oh, well, and I said next week, I meant March 1st, obviously.
Okay.
So
Wanna make sure.
we could go ahead and put together a postcard that had the courtesy notice and expand that beyond the 200 feet. We could also contact neighborhood associations or HOAs if we have that information. Sometimes you can Google it, we can start to build that inventory, or
Right.
to build that catalog. We can go ahead and implement the property signs and work with the manager's office to make sure that the information provided on those is what, how we want them to read. The online and social media postings are very easy to implement. And then the neighborhood meetings, we can recommend them if we know that they're in a neighborhood. But, they wouldn't be codified, we would just highly recommend them as part of that process.
So,
Which
and how much
we do
this
that
can be-
now. I'm sorry?
How much of this will you also note what the developer would pay for, so that the city's not incurring, all of this expense, like you mentioned with the property signs?
So in order to assess a fee for these, we would have to come forward with some sort of amendment, because we currently don't have a fee schedule for these types of endeavors. In this next year, we are going to be reassessing our fees and reevaluating them to see if they need to be increased. So it could be a scenario where we just update our fees to cover the cost of some of these additional items, or some of these can just be given straight to the applicant. I know some cities that I looked at, they actually have a separate application for the sign where they're given all the specs. They go to the sign contractor. They're responsible for the fee, for ordering it, for placing it on the sign. In other cities, it's just incorporated into their fee, and the city does all of the legwork. So,
Okay, well,
and then,
you'll give us information with your preference.
yes, and as we move forward, we'll get a better idea of what the actual cost would be. And so right now, we're not sure what that cost would be because, we haven't done this before. So 6 months could give us some more information on, do we need to update our fees? Is our current budget, can that accommodate some of these changes that we're making because they don't have a significant impact? So those are things that we could bring back in 6 months.
Okay, that sounds good. Any other comments from council? No?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you, Elena. Now, are you aware of the time?
No, I am now. It is, yes. Do we want to come back after the regular session? Or, I think that we can cover it all with the time that we have remaining. But if the mayor would like to take a break and come back, then we can do that as well.
I'm hearing there's some interference and feedback.
Oh.
Everyone could, if you're not talking, please.
Yeah,
So,
Madam
would
Mayor,
your
I'm
your
sorry.
presentation take more than 10 minutes?
Yeah, I believe that it won't take more than 10 minutes because a lot of this information is just a recap of what we covered last time. And
Okay, so do we have it, first of all, do we have anyone there that publicly wants to speak to this before we get started? Because that may make a difference.
Ms. Costello.
Okay.
The only thing
So,
I want
Stella,
to say
can-
is, the renters under the law don't have any standing. I agree with sending it out and I agree with having them notified, but under state law, in any of it, they don't have standing, and I just wanted to point that out.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Okay, so Elena, let's go ahead and run through your presentation, and then perhaps we can, unless I want to defer to our city manager if that's okay with him, and then we can pick it back up, or do we want to move it to, I just hate to move it to another month, for another month. So,
Mayor, if it's okay, if Ms. Chafin can go ahead and go through her materials. I believe the actual regular meeting is relatively short, and maybe we can just kind of reconvene and pick it back up where she left off, if that's okay.
okay. Well, I may have to leave a little early, but yes, let's try that.
Okay.
Okay, so go right ahead.
All right, thank you. All right, so this is a continuation of the work session that we had on December 15th, where staff introduced a number of plans and studies that the city either recently completed or are currently underway, and then future plans and studies that the city is planning to move forward with, some of which would require additional action by City Council. So in this presentation, we'll briefly recap the information we went over in December, and then we'll talk about next steps and implementation. So again, as a recap, on your screen, you'll see a combined list of both plans and studies that the city is currently undertaking. These are identified by a check mark in the first column on the left, as well as additional proposed plans identified by staff. These are the same plans and studies, again, that we reviewed during the last discussion. This chart has been updated to reflect that the risk and resilience assessment and emergency response plan that's required by TCEQ is currently underway. So that item has moved forward and actually has moved forward under budget as originally proposed. In your packet, we also included a short description of each of these items listed. And again, all of these studies would include outside consultant services except for the incentive policy, which is an internal update by NEDCO. We've broken that chart down into funded and not funded categories and added more detailed information in regards to staff oversight and estimates on the start and completion deadlines for these various items. This slide includes the plans that are funded and are underway or maybe actually may be completed, and includes the fire station study, the return on investment study that you guys heard earlier this month from the Virginity Group, the water and sewer master plan, and that risk and resilience assessment study that I just mentioned. The city's total investment for these is $250,000, $50,000 of which was funded in the 2019-2020 fiscal year. This slide includes the plans and studies that are not currently funded, and again, with more detailed information in regards to staff oversight and estimates on start and completion dates. By the nature of these plans, some of them will need to be completed prior to others, and some of them concurrently. Based on our estimates and staff direction and city council direction that we received last time, we have reordered this information by priority and estimated completion, and we'll go over those in just a minute. I did receive an update from the fire department that the hazard mitigation action plan will probably be delayed till next year as they continue to help facilitate the distribution of the COVID-19 vaccines. And so based on this timeline and our cost estimates, the total funding to complete all of the plans over the next 3 years will be right at $700,000, with $500,000 of that which could possibly be funded this fiscal year within our current general fund balance. So the downtown master plan and the comprehensive plan update listed at the top of the chart are the two studies that we're seeking additional direction on this evening. And just to give you a recap and a summary of what these plans include, the comprehensive plan was updated in 2003, and this is the official policy document guiding the long-range planning and community development of the city of Nacogdoches. It's usually updated every 10 years. The plan provides a vision for the future of the city by reviewing our current conditions, identifying long-range goals and objectives, and creating implementation strategies. The supporting documents included are a future land use plan, future transportation plan, and a parks and community facilities plans, among others. For Nacogdoches, this particular update would include an I-69 corridor study, which would provide additional evaluation and recommendations for more specific future land use, utility, and design suggestions in that area. And then based on the feedback received by council, we also incorporated the housing needs study in this plan as well. And so the cost estimate was increased a little bit because we incorporated that housing needs study as a component. The downtown master plan was last updated in 1998. This creates a vision specifically for downtown Nacogdoches. It includes building facades, streetscapes, pedestrian access, all of those kind of outdoor visual amenities. It also acts as a framework for future ordinances and initiatives. These are coordinated strategies to help reinvigorate the downtown area. And this plan would also reference and potentially incorporate the land use or the outcomes and recommendations of that land use fiscal analysis that you guys heard earlier this month from the Virginity Group. So staff is proposing to move forward with these two studies and issue RFQs as early as February. Based on our proposed timelines, these studies would be initiated at the same time and have some overlap with the downtown plan being completed in the fall of 2021 and the comprehensive plan being completed in the spring of 2022. Both of these plans would require a very extensive community engagement and outreach component and would require these consultants to work very closely together to ensure consistent messaging and reduce any unnecessary redundancy between the two processes. So to summarize this evening, we're looking for feedback from council on the order in which we've listed these plans and studies. And again, that hazard mitigation action plan will be delayed till next year. And then also direction on moving forward with an RFQ for the downtown master plan and comprehensive plan. Again, these items would require a budget amendment, which we would bring forward at the time that we would be awarding any kind of contracts for consultant services for these studies. So with that, I'll conclude my presentation and open it up for any questions from the council.
Okay, thank you. Well, we will come back to this at the end of tonight's meeting, so hold their questions while we move to our regular agenda. Thank you, Elena, very much. Okay, so it is 5:27. I have, and do we have anyone that has signed up for the open forum?
Yes, ma'am, Ms. Costello.
Okay. Before she begins, let me just, as a reminder, open forum is the public's opportunity to address the council on any matter related to the city that is not on tonight's agenda. Your comments are limited to 3 minutes, and in accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, the City Council generally cannot discuss, consider, or take action on matters not listed on tonight's agenda. So go right ahead, Pat.
Here I am again. Okay. First, please understand that I do appreciate all the work that you do, and I do appreciate what a pain I am. But the matter I'm addressing is a very important matter to me and to many. Anyway, we love Nacogdoches, and I've only been here about 15 years. Sometimes in the course of any endeavor, mistakes are made. And if a mistake is made in the law, the city council does have the right to rectify it. And I pointed this all out to you, and I'm sure you know better than I all the codes. It's easy to understand because this past year has been like no other year in any of our lives with COVID coming down. And you as city people have more important things on your mind. Okay, a mistake was made. The rezoning of Lot 12, Block 41, 11-2, Logansport, was a serious zoning mistake. Let me give you a little history of the area. Lot 11, Block 41, is owned by the heirs of the Walton family. The Walton family are an old black family that go back to the last century. They were the people that donated the land that is now Zion Hill Church. I was able to contact them. They are living in Tyler, and they are the heirs to the land behind this area. They question the fact that where is their history in the town? But that's another issue for another time. They're opposed to this. Okay, now, let me bring forward the mistakes, and I have documentation for every mistake. They were not necessarily made intentionally. When the letter was sent to the city plan, by the city planner, and the advice that was given to P&Z, it states, and I have it right here, This is an area, a mix of both low and high-density housing. It is not. The R4 zoning is intended for higher density housing district. Zoning should not adversely impact the adjacent land use. We maintain it would. Planning and zoning mission. The mission of the planning and zoning, I have it here. To protect owners against the adverse effect of others' actions. Promote land use conforming to the neighborhood. Protect the existing neighborhood. This zoning does not represent this neighborhood. It does not comply with the comprehensive plan. The developer has stated that he will be building up to 7 duplexes. And his plan, and I asked him this was with conversation I had with him, so I'm not just making this up, is to rent them to students. He told me that this was what he was doing for his retirement. So the whole point of the duplexes is about someone making an investment and to receive money. No problem with that, except when you're going to make a change of zoning, it should be compatible within the neighborhood. Zoning runs with the land. And so once this is R4 zoning, many years from now, a 50-story building could be done because zoning runs with the land. So R4 jeopardizes the area now and for the future. It is not
Ms. Stella,
Yes?
thank you very much.
No,
but
I have to go a little
you're
more. It's
No,
not
ma'am,
compatible
I'm
to the
sorry.
historic and family neighborhood settled by
No, ma'am.
many.
I'm sorry, your 3 minutes
All right,
are
well, then
up.
I'm going to summarize it by saying, without giving you all the law that I gave you, I will summarize it saying this. We
Thank
ask
you.
that you honor the request of the many citizens of Nacogdoches
Ms.
who are
Stella,
opposed to the rezoning
Stella,
and have
I need to
contacted you and made their wishes known.
Everyone,
Or allow a developer who does not live in the neighborhood to
I
build
need-
7 duplexes for the purpose of
Don't
making a
mind,
profit. I
but
thank you.
it is not fair to the other people that speak in open forum. Thank you. We're going to move to our consented, isn't there anyone else that wanted to speak, Jan?
No, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Move to our consent agenda, and I believe we just have one item, and those are the minutes. And so if someone would like to, has any discussion on that, that's fine. If not, Chair would entertain a motion for approval.
I'll make a motion, we approve the consent agenda as it's written.
I'll second.
Okay, moved and seconded, we approve the consent agenda as it is written. If no further discussion, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. For our regular agenda, A, receive a presentation on historic sites and cemetery activities. And I believe we have Jessica Sowell, Historic Sites and Main Street Manager.
Yes, Mayor, Council, thank you for having me today. It's a pleasure to be here to talk to y'all about historic sites and cemeteries, which doesn't sound interesting, but I promise it is. And I'm usually up here talking about the Zion Hill Church, but believe it or not, this presentation doesn't talk about Zion Hill. We're doing a lot of other things in our departments, and I'd like to highlight those today. So 2020 started really strong for everybody in historic sites. We had a lot of tours, great tourism, wonderful groups that came through. But like everybody else, around March, everything went a little haywire, and we were forced to kind of adapt and pivot and figure out where museums fit in. And of course, that's how everybody's profession and lives were, and the museum world was not immune to that. Like everybody else, we had several changes due to COVID-19. In 2020, we had canceled events. We have a list here of kind of our favorite ones, like our beefsteak dinner. But we figured eating community style with our hands was not the best thing to do in 2020, so we put that off and hope to have it this year. We didn't have any large tour groups that came in after March. Normally we have bus tours from Houston, Austin, New Orleans, all over that bus in these big groups to come visit our museums, and of course that wasn't happening. And normally in May we have all of our Nacogdoches ISD 4th graders that come and see us, and unfortunately we couldn't do that. And then our museums, due to the governor's orders, closed from March 16th, and then we reopened June 3rd. So that way we could kind of assess and figure out how we move forward from here. During our time we were closed, we were forced to really adapt what the museums were doing, like everybody else was. And the easiest way for us to adapt and do things quickly was to rely on social media interaction. Our museums were closed, and so we really needed to show people that we were still at the museums, the local history still mattered, and the easiest way to reach them was social media, because I know when things first closed down, all we're doing is scrolling our phones and looking at news, so we thought we'd throw some fun things on there so people could interact with. We did some historic social distancing photos. There's a lot of pictures of people standing in trees in the 1800s. They're just kind of out by themselves in nature, so we kind of tongue-in-cheek did that to add some levity to a weird situation. We did a lot of Throwback Thursday photos, and then our favorite was my I Spy photos. We did a lot of really cool pictures of downtown Nacogdoches, and then asked people to find certain things. So this one, you have to find a barber pole. It was fun. People commented, shared, liked it. They would download the picture of their phone and circle it and send it back to us saying they found it. So it was a really quick and easy way for us to engage with the people in Nacogdoches. We also did our glow-up photos. The museums were closed to the public, but of course our staff was still there working. And so it gave us a lot of opportunities to work on collection care. Normally you can't do a photo set up like this when you think a tour is going to walk in any minute, because that's a lot of moving parts and equipment sitting out, and we don't want anybody to knock into anything. So we were able to take our photos. On the lower left is kind of our group picture we had of this chocolate set, and then photograph each piece individually and show off our kind of glow-up photos on Facebook. A lot of people really engaged and asked about individual artifacts, when we got them, where they're from, the history of it. And then a lot of people asked about our little photo booth setup and where we bought it, things like that, because they wanted to take pictures of their things, because everyone was stuck at home, so why not? So we did that a lot as well. We kind of leaned on the things that we knew, and of course that was Facebook and Instagram early on. In May, we were part of a virtual Historic Preservation Month. The This Place Matters campaign is a national campaign that happens every year. And ideally, we'd like to go out to these spots and host events and do whatever we could in person, but in May 2020 wasn't really possible. But instead, we partnered with all of our local historic sites that are city-owned, or like Millard's Crossing, Oak Grove Cemetery, Old University Building, the places that aren't necessarily city-owned or aren't manned, like Oak Grove Cemetery. And we went and put our This Place Matters yard signs in front, took a lot of photos, and then shared those to social media, talking about the history of these places. People talked about their experiences there. And we also kind of put little notes on there that Oak Grove Cemetery is open and you can walk through, and it's a good social distance activity you can do. You don't run into a lot of people at the cemetery, hopefully. And so that was something they could do on their own. And it was really fun because we partnered with places like Millard's Crossing, who did pictures of their museums, and then we cross-posted them so people would know that if they're just friends with Millard's Crossing on Facebook, like, oh, there's this NAC Historic Sites one, and we got a lot of likes and shares and engagement from that. Once we opened up in June, we were faced with, we want to have tours and we want to do our activities in some way. And one of the best ways we adapted one of our programs was changing our junior engineer days that happen in the summer to junior engineer boxes. Normally we have 80 kids that come in and play with toys and eat snacks and color and do all these crafts together, which is so fun and it's a great day. But in June 2020, the thought of that was terrifying and not something we could really do. So instead, we pivoted our budget, since we already had budgeted to do all these craft activities and games and toys, and put them into individual boxes that parents and teachers and babysitters, whoever, could come pick up for their kids and then do these activities at home. We did boxes in June, July, August, and December. Our June boxes, we got rid of 50 of them in 20 minutes, which was very surprising. I had some angry parents that I promised boxes for July, and we delivered on that. But especially in June, you have to think about these parents who had their kids home since March and really needed something to do. So we filled the boxes with toys, activities, recipe cards. One of everyone's favorite snacks at Junior Engineer Day is our coal cookies, which are like Rice Krispie treats made with Oreos. They're delicious. So we gave those recipes out, so hopefully that's one more thing that the parents could do with their kids. We plan on continuing this program because it's been so popular. So we'll have another junior engineer box for Valentine's, a spring break one, and then a summer one as well. We hope we can have junior engineer days on a smaller scale when we've kind of deemed it a little bit safer to do. And in the middle of a pandemic, we actually opened another museum. That was possible due to the city reorganization. With historic sites and Main Street being combined, that got us another full-time person, which thank you for, it's wonderful. So now Bethany, who I know many of you have seen, she is at the depot Thursdays and Fridays, and then we have part-time staff there on Saturday. So the depot is now open Thursday through Saturday from 10 to 4. We've had great attendance. We've done these junior engineer boxes. It's driven people in, and we also have our brand new exhibit that we worked on for close to a year. And then it was delayed because it was supposed to be installed in April. The company that we work with is in Ohio, so they were shut down a few weeks before we were. And once they opened back up, they finished the fabrication. They all drove together in this huge truck to deliver it so they wouldn't have to fly commercial or anything like that, and actually installed this in June. The exhibit's wonderful. If you haven't come by, I encourage you to do that. It's all about railroad history, the history of traveling on the train, which many people in my generation and younger, they didn't ride on trains, so it's a totally new experience for them, and talking about what it was like to work on a railroad. It's not always glamorous. There's one man we feature his history, and he lost an eye working on the railroad and then used to pop his glass eye out to entertain children. So we talk about that in the exhibit just to make sure it's not boring. We also transitioned back to some smaller scale events. We still do in-person tours at the museum. It's great because people come kind of with their little bubble they're comfortable with. When they leave, we go through and we sanitize the building and can have another tour after that. Rather than having our big holiday open houses that are like for 2 hours where we have live music and food, since we can't do that right now, we did holiday open house for a month in December over at the Stern Huey Museum. There's a few pictures of our very Victorian Christmas exhibit where we decorate in Victorian style from top to bottom. There's so much garland in that museum and decorations everywhere. And so people were invited to come through all month, see the exhibit, do a craft that corresponded with this, either making an ornament or one of those Christmas poppers that you pull and all the stuff falls out of it. So people did that all month long. And we also did candy trains at the railroad depot. I think I bought every roll of Lifesavers in this town because each candy train requires a Lifesaver roll and then a whole bunch of other candy. So we packaged those up, gave them out to families either to take them home and make them with instructions, or some people sat there at the depot with us and we kind of guided them through it. And we did that for 3 weekends in December, and I think we gave out probably 300 bags of candy, if not more. There was a lot of very rushed trips to Walmart, but we got it done. We've also been working on a cemetery interpretation project at Oak Grove Cemetery. This is the final portion of a grant given by the Bright Foundation to the City of Nacogdoches and to the Friends of Historic Nacogdoches Incorporated. The grants go together to fully interpret the cemetery. The first step that we finished in July was an index and a map that goes with it under our interpretive building. The index took probably about 8 months to make. We had 4 different indexes within the city about who was buried at Oak Grove Cemetery. One's an old ledger, we had an Excel sheet, we had a binder, and index cards that then I had to make all of them match. It took years off of my life, but we got it done. So we have that under the building, and then we have wayfinding signs throughout the cemetery. So ideally, if you are looking for John Smith in Oak Grove Cemetery, you can go find him on the index, find him on the index, go find him on the map, and then when you walk through the cemetery, the wayfinding signs tell you that here's the original section, or the veteran section, or the Catholic section, and then you can go find his burial. The next part that we are almost finished with is our interpretive panels. The panels are going to be beautiful. Paneer Signs is making them for us. There will be 7 of them placed throughout the cemetery. A few will be under the building as far as like an introduction, information about headstones and how you read them and how you care for them. And then the other ones throughout the cemetery are more topical and subject-based about the people that are buried in the cemetery. So we talk about the boosters who raise money for Hotel Fredonia. We talk about the signers of the Texas Declaration of Independence, Dietrich Rolfs, like this example here. My favorite is the women in the arts, because we have 3 women buried in Oak Grove Cemetery that you would never know about unless we had a sign. One is Mary Schindler, who was a very famous hymn writer in the 1800s. I think she had 4 or 5 books full of hymns that just she wrote, which was an accomplishment then and a huge one now too. We also have Carl Wilson Baker, who is our famous poet in Nacogdoches, and then also Helen Vinson, who is Dietrich Rolf's granddaughter, and she was a movie star in the 1920s and 30s. And you would never know these women are out there, but we're going to have these great panels with their pictures and information about them that's right near where they are buried. So those are going through our final reviews right now with our city staff and our Friends of Historic Nacogdoches board. Once they're approved, they take about 1.5 to 2 months to print and then ship down here, and they'll be put in Oak Grove Cemetery in the spring. So that's kind of what we've been doing in 2020 in the past year. We're still looking forward to how museums operate in 2021. We're planning virtual events. I'm not gonna lie, I'm not super tech savvy, but I know a lot of people that are. So we're looking at other museums and how we can partner together or use the same resources and kind of bring some of those virtual events to life. Doing smaller events, the public library has been very successful in doing kind of family bubble events. So we're looking at how we can expand that to historic sites and working with them. Either they do events with us or teach me how to do it. Also making sure that we have online components for all of our educational events. Early in 2020, if there was a COVID exposure or something, you canceled the event because no one knew how to move everything to Zoom. So we're looking at all of our events and like how we can do that quick switch because of course COVID exposures are not going to be something that go away. They're something we're going to live with for quite a while. And then of course doing all this by focusing on the safety and the health of our staff and then the public. We invite people in, but how do we make sure they're healthy and happy and following these protocols while they're here? So that's what we've been doing, and that's kind of where we're headed. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Okay, first let's see if there's anyone there in attendance that from the public that would like to make a comment. No, ma'am. Okay, thank you. Let's start with Mr. Hens.
Sure. So I, in the midst of all the chaos this year, I've completely forgot about the Railroad Depot Museum. I've got a 2-year-old that's watching Mighty Trains right now, I guarantee. And so that will be awesome. How has it been received? Like the model train exhibit, I've been to that since it's been there. It's been outstanding. But besides that, how about the rest of the museum?
The rest of the museum has been great. I'm not going to lie, we disappointed a lot of people at Christmas because we didn't have the model train show, but that one brings in hundreds of people a weekend, so not something we could do this year. The response to our smaller events has been wonderful, but then day to day, we've had a lot of people come through. We usually ask them how they heard about it, and it's either Facebook, the CVB, or I saw the lights on. Because now we have the windows open, the lights are on, we have flags out there so people can see that we are in the building. We're on a lot of biker tour routes, so we've had a lot of people riding Harleys and taking pictures in front of the building, which has been neat. And then we have a lot of people that bring in friends and family because they had a family member that worked at our depot or that members traveling on a train. So day to day, we've actually had a good number of people that came through. We weren't really sure about how that was going to go in the middle of a pandemic and people staying home, but people have come in their small groups and we've had a great response.
That's awesome. I appreciate that. Oak Grove too. That's fantastic. I got the tour in 7th grade like everybody else, but I was busy paying attention to butterflies probably. And so that was really helpful because since I've been back for 10 years, wandering out there, it's a little tricky unless you were just intimately familiar with all the plots. That was really helpful. So I'm really grateful for the role y'all took in that.
Well, thank you. And we still do have our cemetery phone number because even if you're not really familiar with Oak Grove Cemetery, it's still hard to find people. So we still do have the phone number so you can call our awesome cemetery crew to help you find somebody. But
I hadn't considered that. That's
you really can. You can call and Clinton will answer the phone and he'll tell you where to go or he'll come out and mark it for you. Our cemetery guys are wonderful, but we're hoping to help a little bit. And so that way you can wander on your own as well.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Of course.
Mr. Anderson.
No real questions. Mainly just thank you to you and your whole staff there for the creativity and the perseverance in a very, very difficult year. I realize I've been telling everybody, every department this from last year, and I really look forward to having your activities go back to the way they used to be, but it's great that you have alternatives for now and alternatives for the future that can be mixed in with all of the in-person stuff that we'd all become accustomed to, and mainly just thank you for working all that out.
Absolutely. We love what we do, and my staff has been very dedicated and creative, so they've done a wonderful job too.
Yeah.
Okay, Ms. Fisher.
Trying to unmute myself, sorry. No questions. Thank you so much, Jessica, for just echoing what Councilmember Anderson said. Thank you and all of your staff for the work that you've done and being dynamic and positive in very difficult times.
Thank you.
And Mr. Bolden.
Thank you for the report. I have one question and one comment. Sunday night I was on the SFA Historic Library site, And they mentioned a family name that was in Oak Grove.
Okay.
At the time, I would have liked to have been able to go to a link to see all the names in the Oak Grove Cemetery. Is that anything in the future?
We have been talking to our city GIS department, and then, of course, SFA's forestry department actually does a lot of the GIS work as well. They have a database that is not the greatest. It's not very user-friendly, that you can search the burials. But now that we have our complete index, it's in an Excel file that's usable. We're going to send that to them and to see if they can update theirs. So it's not ready yet, but it is in the works.
Yeah, I mean, I was not looking for the name of that family. It's just that I ran across it. And it was an African-American family that lived down on Little Creek, right, Old Taylor Road. It's called Pearl Street now. But I was totally surprised that that family was in there. And I guess I'll manually go out and walk it tomorrow.
Well, if you need help finding it, let me know, and I can get you to the right people, and I can help you find it.
The other thing was the train depot. I was in our Brazos County meeting last year, and trains came up because there was one of actually the president of Brazos Transit District. He has all type of trains, and I mentioned to him that back in the 50s, we took a train from Nacogdoches to Timpson, Texas, to go to the Fox Theater for a movie there, our class. And sure enough, for December, he sent me a train.
Really?
Not
How neat.
complete, but it was just one car. But yeah, I was totally shocked.
Well, how neat.
It
I'm
was
definitely have to
full
get
of
an oral
dust and
history from you now.
everything, But yeah. But thank you for what y'all are doing there. We really appreciate it as a council.
Absolutely, we're happy to do it.
Okay, great presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Item B, receive update on COVID-19 data impacts hospitalizations and vaccination planning for our community. And we have Chief Kipling. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Keith Kiplinger, your fire chief, and I know that what you want to talk about more than anything is COVID-19. We've only had 9 months to talk about it, so it should be fresh on everyone's mind. But what I wanted to do was spend a little bit of time tonight, if possible, sort of detailing the impacts in our community, what's actually happened over the past 9 months, and especially what's happening now, just to give you a bit of an update so that you have information that you can take back out on the street with you and share with the public what you know. So effective now, as of today, 3,484 people have had COVID in our community, according to the Department of State Health Services. Now, that's an estimated number. I suspect that the number is probably double that. I know lots of people that lost taste and smell back in April but never got tested because as testing rolled out in March and April, it was a little tough to get testing. It wasn't readily available. And so I think that that number is probably about half of the real number. There are currently, as of today, 289 active cases in our community that we know of. Now, that's an estimated number as well. There's a formula, and they plug in the date that you got sick and how sick you got, and the state kind of comes up with a formula. And we rely on the state to give us that information and those numbers. There have also been 110 deaths in our community. Now, I talk to people every day about the number of deaths, and I have friends that think that this is the bubonic plague and the world is coming to an end, and I have friends that think this is not real and it's all imaginary. The reality is that 110 people in our community have died, and the local physicians, the people that we go to church with, that we sit next to at restaurants, all identified that those 110 people died of COVID-19 complications. And so I trust those local doctors. Certainly on the national level, you know, I hear a lot of skepticism about the data, but in Nacogdoches, in our community, I'm perfectly comfortable telling you that that's the real number. As of right now, I am excited to tell you that we are averaging 16 new cases a day. I'm excited about that because we're coming off of highs in the 30s, and so that's a really, really good thing in our community. So going into the Thanksgiving holiday and the Christmas holiday, we knew what was going to happen. I think we all had a pretty good idea of what was going to happen. And if you look at the red trend line, the sort of orangey brown arrow represents Thanksgiving. And if you look at the red trend line, that's representing 7-day moving averages. You will see in the week and a half, 2 weeks following Thanksgiving, a precipitous increase in COVID cases. This is new cases. Now, we had not come down off of that plateau from Thanksgiving when we entered the Christmas holiday weekend, and so December 24th is shown by the red arrow. And so you can see what happened after the Christmas holiday. New Year's followed that, and we had a pretty significant increase over time. You will notice a very steep decrease in the last couple of days, and that's a really good thing. It's coming down faster. I expect that it's going to bubble around a little bit, and it's not going to bottom out until we get back to normal. Sometime in mid-February, we should be back to our normal numbers. So what are those normal numbers? Well, if you go just to the left of that yellow arrow on the 7-day moving average, we were averaging between 3 and about 7 cases a day for a long period of time leading up to Thanksgiving. We also were in about the same numbers early on before the summer surge happened at the end of June. And so about 5 cases a day is probably our real normal if nothing extraordinary is happening in our community. So when we looked at active cases, again, the yellow and red arrows show you when the holidays hit, and you could see those increases. The big jump or the big surge back earlier, that was our June and July surge that we all knew happened, and we all felt that. And so we're again on the active cases, we again are showing that we're coming off that peak, and hopefully that's the case. So what really matters? What really matters actually is the availability of hospital beds. So we want to have less cases, but ultimately the thing that costs us the most lives, that costs us the most serious problems, are when our hospital beds fill up. So if you'll go to the time before Thanksgiving, and this is a little shorter duration chart, you'll realize that we had 8 to 10 to 12 COVID patients in general beds among the 2 hospitals in Nacogdoches. After Thanksgiving, that number bounced up to around 38. So it was an almost 3-fold increase in hospitalizations in general beds. And then you'll notice that number crept on up into the 40s. Again, I'm very thankful that number seems to be trending down a little bit right now, and hopefully we'll keep seeing that downward trend. ICU data, I think you can see the same thing. Now, on a given year, in any given year, there are days when our ICU beds are full. We have 22 ICU beds that are staffed regularly between the 2 hospitals, and there are days that those are full. Days when there's a lot of flu and pneumonia going around and a couple of bad car accidents and 3 or 4 unlucky people have a heart attack or a stroke can fill up those local beds. So it's not uncommon to see our ICU beds filled up. What is uncommon is to see 10 or 12 or 15 or 18 cases of people with COVID, because what we've done is added an entire 18 beds, knowing that there are days that we fill up without this new disease, without this new problem. And so you can see that we've hit 20, 21, and 22 lots of days over the past. Again, if you look at those arrows, you can see the holidays and see what the impact was of those family gatherings and people passing the candle back and forth on Christmas Eve. And again, we knew that was going to happen. So I've heard a lot of discussion about vaccinations, and I want to start out with the absolute statement, and I know you've all seen it in writing. The city and the county don't control any aspect of vaccines or vaccinations. We have no authority over it. We have no control over it. The state and federal government are working directly with local authorized and approved providers. Some of those are physicians, some of them are hospitals, some of them are clinics, some of them are pharmacies. And those allocations are directed from the state directly to those approved providers. What the city and county can do is try to help facilitate getting those doses out and getting them into arms. So a couple of weeks ago, we were successful working with Brookshire Brothers Pharmacy at clearing the backlog of waitlisted people that they had, and they had 450 doses that had not been used. And they had one pharmacist at each of the 2 grocery stores administering them, which caused them a choke point. And so I like to tell people that in local government, we're really good at a couple of things. One of them is filling gaps. whatever that gap is in the community, we seem to step in and try to make that gap go away. The other thing we're pretty good at is blowing up beaver dams. And so we realized that there was a log jam at Brookshire Brothers, and within 22 hours, we're able to open a clinic at the County Expo Center using the list of patients that they had and vaccinate 450 people very quickly. That would have taken about 28 days at the pace they were going. So by partnering with Brookshire Brothers, we were able to effectively do that. So who else did we partner with? We partnered with the county, the SFA School of Nursing, SFA's IT department, NEDCO, the public library. All your city departments have had a hand in this since the beginning. So we're working really hard, and while we don't control the allocation, the distribution, or who gets the vaccine, what we can do is try to help move it along in our community and catch up. One of the things that I've heard over and over is that rural communities like Nacogdoches we're not getting our fair share of the vaccine, that our allocations were smaller. And so I took a look at that, and I took a look at it again today. So as of today, Texas has 29 million or so residents, and about 22.5 million of those are over the age of 16, which is the minimum age for receiving a COVID vaccine. So 22.5 million people will be eligible at some point in Texas to receive the COVID vaccine. As of today, 5% of the Texas population has been vaccinated. So when we look at Nacogdoches County, we have 65,000 residents. Over the age of 16 is 52,500 people. And as of today, we have vaccinated 7% of the Nacogdoches County population. So we are significantly ahead of where the state of Texas is, and we're certainly not where we want to be. Nowhere in the United States, nowhere in the world, nowhere in Texas is there enough vaccine for everybody that wants a vaccine. Last week, we partnered with the county, Nacogdoches Area Physicians Association, and the Nacogdoches San Augustine County Medical Society, and the Department of State Health Services to put a vaccination clinic for 1,000 doses together at the County Expo Center. And so on Thursday, we were able to give 1,000 vaccines. Thursday night, as I was unwinding, because I'm such a nerd, I'd go on and read about COVID after a day of COVID. And I read that New York City was so proud and so pleased that they had a bellwether day on Wednesday and vaccinated 35,000 people in all of New York City. So I got my calculator out because I'm not all that good at math in the head, and I figured out that they vaccinated 0.4% of their population in one day, and we did 1.5% of our population the next day. We're a little tiny place in East Texas, but we're able to effectively, working with our partners, we're really effectively making this happen in a way that other places are not making it happen. And I can't stress enough those partnerships and where we're at. So where's all this coming from? So very quickly, we've put together, and we have a final draft of a community vaccination plan that the city and county have sort of spearheaded. Right now, where we are in this plan is we have sort of two options. One is you get an allocation of 1,000 vaccines, and you turn to us and say, here, we want you to push them out. And that's option one. Option two is you choose off the menu, an a la carte menu, of what things you need for us to help you. So if we get a call from a doctor that has 100 vaccines, but he needs a couple of paramedics from the fire department to come over and stand by while they administer them, we're going to send paramedics from the fire department. If they need somebody to help with registration to get them through East Texas Community Health, we're going to provide that. So we've got sort of a full package. If you want the full package, or anybody that has vaccines that's having trouble moving them, we want to make sure we facilitate that movement, because we don't want to store them in freezers. We don't want to store them on dry ice. We need to store them in people's arms, and that's what we're really trying hard to do. So on the community-wide plan, right now, we're relying, in phase one, we're relying on healthcare providers to provide us with a list of their patients who are most vulnerable. And so that's how people can sign up. So many of our local doctors and clinics are taking those lists of their patients, and they're providing those lists through the Nacogdoches Area Physicians Association. And we are relying on that. That backlog is somewhere over 1,000 patients as of right now. The Department of State Health Services list came directly from that group as well. And what we're trying to do is get those ICU numbers down, and the best way to do that is to get vulnerable people vaccinated as quickly as possible. And so we're working with those physicians. When we saturated that list, so within a couple of weeks, I hope, we will be able to jump to phase 2, which will be everything that we were doing in phase 1, plus working through the Brookshire Brothers online wait list, because they have opened up an online wait list, and any other waiting list that we find out about that exist in our community. And also opening a call center using volunteers at the Emergency Operations Center. So we'll allocate what we need to the doctors and hospitals. We'll allocate what we can to those people that are on the Brookshire Brothers wait list, and then we will open up a call center to allow anybody to call in on a first-come, first-served basis and get on a list to get an appointment for a vaccination. And so doing a call center is a little bit more complicated than I understood, but we'll be able to take 12 to 20 phone calls at a time and queue 36 to 48 people while they're waiting in that queue. And we should be able to move through a large number of people scheduled that way. So people that don't have access to a healthcare provider right now can get on the Brookshire Brothers list by going online. Our call center at 46-virus, which is, I learned today that our 468 number is actually 46-virus. And so I'm really pushing that out there. But they can call and we can help them through that process. There's not a good, effective, easy way right now for us to take a community-wide wait list. In places that have tried it, many of them have the systems have crashed. And so right now we're going to rely on those doctors and encourage people to call their healthcare provider. And if that's not an option for them, go to Brookshire Brothers online and register there. And we're going to clear those wait lists as quickly as we can, and also open up that call-in phone number. Hopefully by the middle of next week, we will have the ability to open that phone number. And so if we know we're going to have 1,000 vaccines on Thursday, we'll allocate 300 or 400, whatever the right number is, to that call center, and people that don't have a doctor can call in and get on that list, and we'll schedule them an appointment right then. When we get to phase 3, it'll be everything in phase 1 and 2, plus community clinics or pop-up clinics. And we're visioning this because we're a couple of months away from getting to this point. Right now, we need to do 500 or 1,000 at a time as we get the vaccines. But eventually, we're going to get to the point where we've reached saturation with those people that are going to be able to come to the expo center. And so what we're envisioning is that we set up outside of churches on Sunday, and when people walk out the door at noon, we put a shot in their arm if they're willing to take it. Those pop-up clinics will go to the rural areas of the county as well, and so we'll be able to set up it in Douglas or in Woden or Martinsville and make sure that we're vaccinating those people. So hopefully we'll be in a position here in town to hit those populations that are particularly vulnerable and particularly difficult to hit with some of these pop-up clinics. But again, we're a couple of months away before I feel like we could even talk about that. Phase 4 is going to be individual access, and that's where we put a paramedic in a car and send them out to the homebound, the people that can't get to any kind of a vaccination clinic. And that's the reality. And that may be a nursing student and a firefighter, or we're working through that. Again, that's probably 3 or 4 months down the road before we can allocate personnel and people to going out and doing that. But it's an essential piece. It's that last mile for us, is making sure that we get everybody that wants a vaccine. So how daunting is the task? I told you there's 52,500 people over the age of 16 in our county. If half the people take a vaccination, that means we have to give 52,500 shots. If half the people that are eligible do that, nobody's ever given 50,000 shots in Nacogdoches before. We're going to do it. We're going to get there. But there are some pretty big logistical challenges that we're still working through. For example, if we were able to get 5,000 doses a week, at some point, about 28 days from now, we will reach a point where we have to give 2,000 shots one day, because we're still going through that population, and we have to start doing second doses. So we're working through those feverishly. We have a good, solid plan that we've worked hard with the healthcare providers, with the nursing school at SFA, with our county partners, and I think we've got a good plan for that. So when we talk about what does it look like, and this is just a sample out of our plan, but just to give you an idea, if you haven't, you come in and you check in, and we check your name off the list, and you queue up, and then you go to a registration table where somebody, typically Mercedes Franks from the library, some of our NEDCO team members, SFA volunteers. Those are the people that are helping walk people through the registration process to do all of the onerous government paperwork that's required to get a vaccine. And then they queue up and are ushered straight to a vaccinator who asks them some qualifying questions to make sure that they don't actively have COVID or some reason that they can't get a shot. Then they're vaccinated very quickly, and in normal cases, they're ushered to a chair where they wait 15 minutes. In certain cases, they need to wait 30 minutes for observation, and so that observation is monitored continually by a nursing student, a firefighter, paramedic, who are walking down the aisles, checking on people, making sure they're doing okay. And after their period of time is over, they're free to leave. In the Brookshire Brothers Clinic, we averaged about 43 minutes per person from car door to car door. In the Department of State Health Services clinic last week, we averaged about 50 minutes per person. And we were doing time motion studies throughout the day to try to identify where those bottlenecks were and make sure that the process was as smooth and easy as possible. And the state paperwork and the state system, the government bureaucracy made things more complicated than a pharmacy. I will tell you that 50 minutes, though, car door to car door is pretty good. My wife's aunt lives in Dallas County and had an appointment for 9:30 Friday morning and showed up at Fair Park at her appointed time, and 5.5 hours later was back on the road. So we're doing it well. What we're doing is working, and it's working okay. The big challenge right now is we don't have enough vaccinations. There's been a lot of discussion as well about people getting shots that aren't 1A or 1B. And I'll tell you that when you thaw 1,000 doses, you give 1,000 doses, and you very quickly have to do that. And so as we reached our plan for Thursday, using the list provided by the doctors, was we thought we'd have about a 5% missed appointment rate. And we estimated that, and we had a local physician sign up 56 people on standby. We had a 12% no-show rate. And we hadn't accounted for that. And so as we go through this and as we learn how to do this, I think we'll be able to figure out what that rate looks like. We had some doctors who 100% of their patients came, and we had some doctors where 35% of their patients on their list actually showed up. And so we have given that list of who came and who didn't, listed by the doctors, back to those physician groups so that they can start working on that as well. So there are some people that are not in 1B that have gotten vaccines because there's 8 left at the end of the day, and 8 vaccines in arms is better than 8 vaccines that are not in arms. Why can't we just do a wide open vaccine clinic? Why do you have to be scheduled? That's a reasonable question, and I get it a lot. If we opened up a vaccine clinic with 1,000 doses and just said show up at the expo center, first of all, you wouldn't be able to get in and out in 43 minutes. Second, you wouldn't be able to drive anywhere because the West Loop would be locked up. We'd have people from 9 counties in Texas and 3 Louisiana parishes showing up trying to give shots. So we have to have an orderly, metered way of doing this. On Thursday, we did 75 people scheduled for every 30-minute time block. And 75 people in a 30-minute time block works really well with 10 vaccinators, and it takes about 40 people to put on a clinic to do 1,000 in a day. It takes about 40 staff people working it. That's 10 vaccinators. So there are 8 people constantly pushing needles in arms, and 2 people taking a break and stretching their fingers out. And so, so what else are we doing? So there's some other threads here that I want to make sure I cover so that you don't think we're just thinking about vaccination. One of them is we're working hard on a volunteer plan. We're going to have volunteers to staff the phone center and to help us with these vaccination clinics moving forward. We're being very careful about those volunteer groups because we don't want to subject a senior citizen to a room full of 1,000 people that are coming through to get COVID vaccines. So we're having to think through that in a pretty methodical way. I look for us to have several volunteer groups. Initially, people working in our call center, our regular 4-6 virus call center. Also, people working in the call center to schedule appointments. Also, people working in the vaccine clinics. And at some point, migrating that volunteer group to actually doing community outreach and trying to make sure that we get the message that people need the vaccine and that need to get the vaccine so that we can get as close to 70% of our population as we possibly can. We're working on our messaging and marketing plan. Part of that is working with some local experts in vaccinations and also with SFA and their multicultural affairs and Spanish language groups. Trying to create some frequently asked questions and bust some myths that are floating around various communities. I will tell you that the microchip in my arm is not bothering me a bit. But I do have friends that think that the government is going to microchip them, and I laugh about that a little bit. But reality is that people are very, very concerned about all different aspects of COVID and about this vaccine. And at some point locally, we're going to have to be the ones that they trust to take the vaccine and to do the right thing. We're working on minority outreach plans with SFA, the city, county, and also our low-income health clinics. Technology solutions, a scheduling solution has been developed by SFA's IT team for us, specifically to do what we're going to do. It will be tested next week, or later this week. They're going to do the testing, and so we should have that ready by next week. And that'll be pushed out to the doctors. So each doctor's office will have the opportunity to have a unique username and login. They can call and say, Mr. Hens, we've got some appointments scheduled for Thursday. We've got vaccine openings. Would you like one between 9 and 9:30? And they'll be able to enter your name, your date of birth, your phone number, and directly enter you into the schedule. And so the doctors will be able to do that directly, which is a lot more efficient than emailing spreadsheets back and forth, which is frankly where we find ourselves today because we just haven't had a global pandemic before. We're also working on that call center solution. SFA was out at the EOC today and is working out the phone system and the call center for us to be able to do scheduling. And so it'll work the same way. People that call in will be scheduled directly into the system, and it'll be real time where the doctors and the call center are all doing that together. We're working hard on access to the vaccine, working with DSHS and various state officials, trying to make sure that we stay at the top of the radar, that they know that we have a community vaccination program, that they know that we're working it, that they know we're doing everything they can, and that they know that if they send me 500 vaccines tonight, I'll have them in arms by noon tomorrow. And we want to make sure that we stay on top of that, because they're not going to sit on a shelf in Nacogdoches County. They're not going to sit in a freezer. They're going to be administered, and that's going to be done very, very quickly. We're working on information coordination and dissemination. One of the big challenges is that there are lots of people working on lots of things, and keeping all of that information coordinated is a little tough. And we're working on coordinating with our partners, our healthcare providers, the other government entities in our community, and also NEDCO. At some point, we'll reach the point that we need to be at Pilgrim's Pride giving some vaccinations at the end of people's work shifts. And we'll need to be at some of these larger employers to try to get that done. And so we're working really hard with those folks, and also with United Way, with the non-governmental entities. I can't stress enough the partnerships and how this is working. I talk every day to an administrator from each hospital. I talk every day to the representatives of the physicians in town. I talk every day to SFA, the county. We're spending a lot of time and energy together, and I think it's going to be fruitful. I'm confident that it's going to be fruitful. I'll be happy to answer any questions you have about anything COVID.
Okay, thank you, Keith. Is there anyone from the public there that wants to make a comment? Not ask a question, but just make a comment about this presentation?
No, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. So let's start this time with Mr. Anderson.
I will start off by saying I took my mother to the vaccination clinic at the Expo Center last Thursday, and I would like to commend you and everyone, police department, all the volunteers, because it was remarkably smooth and remarkably quick. Everything was just like clockwork. You know, I could do without some of the DSHS paperwork certainly, but beyond that, it went remarkably well, and I would like to commend all of you involved with that.
Thank you. The team's working really hard.
I guess my only question is, do you foresee any change in particularly federal guidance and availability of either human or economic resources in the coming weeks? And if so, do you think that will change anything with your plan?
I suspect that by close of business tomorrow, we'll have a lot better idea what that's going to look like. Hopefully, we're doing this understanding that we'll get some reimbursement from FEMA because this is a declared disaster, just like a hurricane. But knowing that won't make Nacogdoches whole, there is a cost to doing this. And we're dedicated to doing it, and at your direction, at council's direction, let's do whatever we can to make this the shining star, I think, of the way to do this. So I think we'll know more about that, the allocation of resources. Right now, we don't need anybody to come give shots. We don't need anybody to help us with anything other than send us vaccines.
It certainly didn't appear that way last week, I'll tell you that.
So,
It appeared as though everything was,
I'll tell you,
was organized remarkably well.
A comment from one of the state health department employees the afternoon before the vaccine clinic last Thursday. They said, well, we need this set up so that when the chaos starts, and I said, this is Nacogdoches, we're not gonna have chaos. We're gonna do this quick and orderly and get people in and out and get them on their way so that we can move past this. And we're gonna be doing, this is not a sprint. We've got 5 or 6 more months of this vaccination phase, and I'm so looking forward to it, as I know you are. But we're not gonna, I think we're not gonna have that. I think we're gonna be just fine. We're working through some things like last minute standby lists, and how do you make up for 12% not coming when you planned on 5% not coming? Well, all of a sudden you've got 70 vaccines that have to be administered, and we're at the end of the day and you have to do it quickly. So working through those things and making sure that we're as equitable as possible, that we're as fair as possible, and that we're doing the best job we can for the community is what we're working hard to do.
Well, I'll tell you from my experience, if that remains the norm, then we're in remarkably good shape here.
Okay, Ms. Fisher.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Chief, you blew me out of the water again, and I know that it's you in partnership with a lot of institutions, and I recognize that it is a team effort, but my mama also taught me that when somebody gives you a compliment, you say thank you instead of saying, oh, it's everybody else, I don't do anything. So no, but seriously, I've heard exactly what Jay said, how efficient and how well organized when this team gets its hands on vaccines, how you guys have handled that, and I am yet again very impressed with the work that you guys do, so thank you. I have 2 sort of overarching concerns and then some specific questions. My 2 concerns have to do with communication. One is with the equitable distribution of information in terms of vaccine availability. And the other one is with the dissemination of information to combat anxieties, misinformation that's out there about the vaccine. And so I wanted to ask you, through these phases, with the healthcare providers, and then phase 2, particularly with the wait list on Berkshire's and having a call center with a phone number that anybody can just call if you're not on a wait list or if you don't have a physician who's plugged you in already. Is there a plan already? And if so, what is it for making sure that information is equitably distributed across the county? Because I think it's clear that traditional forms of communication, having an article in the Daily Sentinel, having a story on KTRE, posting on Facebook, it seems pretty clear that is not adequate and that we need to meet people where they are.
So I feel like you just teed this up for me. Thank you. So we are blessed that in our county we have an absolute vaccination expert, and who retired from UNICEF doing mass vaccinations across the developing world. And she has joined our team, and we met with her a couple of weeks ago. She helped us with the Brookshire Brothers Clinic, did some analyses of things that she saw that we could improve upon. And we took those to heart and added them into the vaccination plan. Additionally, last week, she met with the city and county public information team to start working on that very thing, that very myth-busting messaging, the equitability messaging, and making sure that we get that we find all those avenues to get the message out in the community. If it means that I've got to go and preach on Sunday mornings at a church, I guess I'll work on that. But But we are working hard to do that. Additionally, that public information team is going to be joining with SFA's Office of Multicultural Affairs. And Jessica's probably sitting behind me with this look like, oh, okay, you added one. So we're going to work with the Office of Multicultural Affairs and also the Foreign Languages Program at SFA to make sure that we're pushing that out. And if it comes down to the point that we need to have people going door to door that speak Spanish and English to get the message out, we're not there today. We don't have enough vaccines today, but we could very well see ourselves there in April. So while we don't have all those plans finalized, we're working very diligently to make sure that we do have a plan that's based on trigger points. And so those trigger points are when we start to see that the large vaccine clinics fed by the doctors are not, we don't have enough people, then we'll move to the trigger point and move to phase 2 in the vaccination plan. And open it up more. And I think very much the same way with regard to public information. I'd like to see us with trigger points so that we have a plan, 90 days out that we say, okay, when this happens, this is what we're going to do next. And this is what we're going to roll out and have all of it just on the shelf ready to roll out in whatever form that takes.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, obviously the concern is people getting vaccinated because, they're well connected or because they have access to a physician, and then other people being left in the dust. And I asked a friend of mine, is your, just to get some information, is your mom getting she's Hispanic, is your mom getting the vaccine? And how does your mom feel about the vaccine? And she goes, she's not taking it. She's terrified. She thinks that it's going to make her sick, or she thinks it's going to give her the virus, or XYZ. And so I am glad to hear, I mean, I'm not expecting like a full, fledged, well, A, B, C, D, and this is the plan for how we're going to do it. But I just wanted to emphasize the concern for equitable distribution of vaccine information in terms of where you can get it and how you can get it, and communities across Nacogdoches County having the same access to that information, but then also, the myth busting stuff. So with that in mind, I know you said phase 1 is for healthcare providers. Is that just doctors, or does that include like community health clinics too?
Absolutely. So what we did was to make sure that we were giving this to the people that needed it first. Was we reached out to the medical community, which is doctors, nurse practitioners, physician assistants, the health clinics, and asked them, the physicians group got together and said, we're going to ask each of them to submit a list of up to 100 names in the first round. And so each of those medical practices was given an opportunity to submit up to 100 names in the first round, which was for the last Thursday vaccination project. And our thought was that the people with the most serious comorbidities have some relationship with a physician or a nurse practitioner, and that those people, we really want to get those people through the line first, as quickly as we can, so that they don't end up in the ICUs. I think we'll very quickly, I look for us to do 2 or 3 more vaccine clinics in this phase 1, where the doctors are telling us who to vaccinate, and then I think we're going to very quickly shift into phase 2. So I look for that to be no more than 3 weeks down the road, as long as the pipeline doesn't dry up.
Okay. A quick follow-up question, and then I'll ask you my next one, and then I'll share. I understand the emphasis of asking doctors with, the assumption that people with significant comorbidities are going to have a doctor who is treating them. I guess my only concern with that, and tell me if I'm wrong, and if you guys don't think that this is an issue, because I'm not the expert here, but I would guess that there are people maybe that don't have health insurance and don't have a regularly treating physician. And so how do you make space for those people, or how do you make sure that those people aren't left out of the fold?
So we estimate that a very high percentage of the sickest people in our community before COVID do have some relationship with a healthcare provider, be it a health clinic, the Brown Family Health Center, or East Texas Community Health. Now, are there some people out there that don't? Yes. And so when we get into phase two, it will be open access, and we'll ask the question, are you over 65, yes or no? And are you over 16 with one of the following? And it's yes or no, and we're gonna take their word for it. So we're gonna allow them, at the call center level, we're gonna allow for that. But again, most people that have serious health conditions are on medication that somebody is having to prescribe for them. And so, so hopefully those doctors are reaching out and getting those lists to us. And actually, they're maintaining the list. We're just taking them on the day of the vaccination clinic. So I don't have a list of names in front of me, but.
Okie dokie. And then the last one for you, Chief. On phase two, where you said it's phase one plus the Berkshire Brothers wait list plus this call center. I guess, is that part of the communications plan? My question originally was, how is that information going to get out to the community at large in an equitable way? But if that, my guess now is that that's part of what you guys are considering as you are developing this mass communication plan.
Absolutely. So the final draft of the vaccination plan with those phases was just finalized Friday afternoon at 4:30 or 5 o'clock. And
Okay.
so this is all because we wanted to make sure all our stakeholders had the opportunity to look at the document and comment on the document, and that Keith wasn't unilaterally writing the vaccination plan for our community. And so now it's in final draft form. My plan is after the next round of vaccination clinics, where we can identify any shortfalls or any items that we left out, then we'll have, then that's when we'll take the word draft off and it'll be the plan. So that's probably, hopefully sometime between now and the middle of next week. But those phases will be communicated to the public as we move forward. But again, they were literally formulated as people were turning off their computers on Friday, so.
Okay, well, thank you, Chief. I appreciate it. And I think that Nacogdoches is really lucky to have you and your team. Thank you. I will share you.
Mr. Bolden?
Thank you, Mayor. It's quite a comprehensive plan, and it's difficult to ask a question after all the other questions have been asked. But
Please pick a hard one.
No, the availability of the vaccine. Now, we're not in where we given the second shot yet, are we?
Yes, sir.
So, okay, so the number of vaccines available that's been given, that's included in the number?
No, so those are initial vaccines given.
Oh, the initial, okay.
Yeah, that's
so
the initial. So
number.
the
Okay.
second vaccine are on a separate list. We started vaccinations right at Christmas for those first doses. And so those people have reached their 28-day number. And so this week, those second rounds started this week.
Okay. Now, we mentioned citizens that does not have a primary care physicians, because we do have a lot of citizens. Their primary care physician is the emergency room. And you stated that they are eligible to call and get on a waiting list, correct?
They can go online and get on a waiting list at Brookshire Brothers Pharmacy. So BrookshireBrothers.com has an online waiting list. We don't have the capacity right now to open a call center and to manage a wait list.
Now, that's where I have an issue, because the majority of those that are using emergency room don't have broadband or ways to get online and schedule. And one of the ways that I feel like would be a good communication tool is to, since most churches are doing their church service virtual, would be able to, if we were able to get information to each church that do their services on a virtual, because normally I pick up a couple of those every Sunday, and it's still a complaint is I don't know how to call in. I don't have ability to call in. What do I do now?
So there is no community wait list. We do not have the technology solution to build a wait list. If we were to build a wait list, we would have to touch every single customer twice. There with 26 to potentially 40,000, 45,000 people. It's just not manageable in Nacogdoches County. And I wish I could tell you something different. But frankly, if 70% of the people that are eligible to take the vaccine sign up on a waiting list, that's 46,000 names. And just managing that data today, we're not there. We're not able to do it. And so our plan is when we get to phase 2, we'll open up slots. We'll advertise them aggressively and say, we're going to have a shot clinic on Thursday. If you want to come in, you can call in on Monday morning at beginning at 10 a.m. And it's first come, first served, because the sheer volume of people is staggering. And I wish I could tell you that we were Amazon and could handle that. We just, frankly, we can't. There's just not enough.
And that's going to be compounded by the second dose, right?
So the second dose should be easier, and here's why. When you leave your first dose appointment with a vaccination card, it has a date and a time written on the back of it, and you go to the same place you got your first dose. So you just show back up to the same place at the same time and get your next dose. So if you were at the Expo Center last Thursday, 28 days from Thursday is February 4th, I believe, maybe February 6th, whatever that date is, and that date is on the back of all their cards, so they should be able to come back in. The other thing that happens with a wait list is let's say that 70% do want to take it, and that's 46,000 people. If we wait list them, we have to touch each customer twice just to get them into an appointment. So we put them on a wait list, and then we have to reach back out and try to schedule an appointment with them. And there's an expectation that we won't lose any names, that nobody will be left behind, and I don't think that's an expectation we can live up to right now. I'm being as candid as I can.
So the date that's on the card, you don't have to call in, okay.
Just show back up at the same time slot that you had the first day. So if we had 1,000, we had 1,000 people on Thursday, on whatever the 28th day is, they'll be back at the Expo Center, and their name is already on a list because they're the same people that came through before, and they'll get vaccinated, get their second shot.
I'm hearing a lot of citizens that have taken the first shot don't think the second is necessary.
I'm going to get a second shot.
Okay. I was going to ask you, who's eligible to administer the vaccination? I mean, do you have to be a registered nurse, doctor?
So we have the unique, the wonderful opportunity that is the SFA School of Nursing. So all of those fourth-year nursing students can administer the vaccines. Paramedics, doctors, nurses, under the supervision of a doctor, a medical assistant, or somebody that would work in a doctor's office could do it. So there's a pretty broad range of people that can do the vaccinations. Here, the nursing students, the practice is good for them, and they're able to go through, every 30-minute slot. We ran 75 people through the other day, so 150 people an hour. And if you have 10 students standing there, that's 15 shots an hour. And so they can very quickly build up 75 or 80. So you want to come late in the day. So they've got lots of practice. Not really. These nursing students have already been giving shots for a long time as they've gone through their clinicals, and this is just giving them more exposure in a community health environment. And so that's great. We realize that they're not always going to be able to be with us, and so we're working with the medical community to have on those days when we just can't get nursing students, but we have vaccines, to get the physicians' offices to give up some staff to help us, and we'll use paramedics and physicians and nurses and whoever we can gather from around the community.
Thank you. I was just out of curiosity, this is just, how long after you take it out of the freezer, how long before you have to administer it?
It depends on the vaccine, and so the real objective is that whatever you take out of the freezer, you use. And so you have a plan to use it by the close of business that day. And so we don't want to waste any vaccines. We don't want to waste a single dose. And so the best way for us to do that is let's go ahead and get it. Tracking the cold trail of these vaccines is a little bit complicated. Pfizer's much more complicated than the Moderna. But somebody has to track that temperature throughout the process and keep electronic logs of that temperature to make sure that we're putting effective vaccine in arms and not ineffective vaccine. And so we have a pharmacist assigned to that project. Depending on the clinic, there's one person that their job is to make sure the vaccines are staying on temp and staying on target, and that we're moving product fast enough. We're not drawing up too much ahead of time so that it's sitting there too long, and we're working through that every time.
I want to thank you, Chief. I know this hadn't been easy, but you all are doing a great job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Hens?
Absolutely, I want to honor you for this. We only got vaccines at one of our pharmacies and not in Nacogdoches because of how complex and convoluted it is, not just with the state, but just the logistics on the day that you thaw them out. It's incredibly complex. And so while we haven't been giving vaccines everywhere, we keep our thumb on the pulse of the counties and the cities that we're in. And I'm really proud to be here. It's not ever going to be perfect because this is brand new and they're so overwhelming. Are the logistics and the coordination between hospital systems and physicians and pharmacies that are for-profit, non-for-profit. There's a lot of coordination. That takes remarkable leadership. And so I was really excited when I saw your presentation and even the extra slides, the extra slides that you had tonight. That's incredible. That's, I'm sure a lot of people have questions I want to put out there from what I've seen in Central Texas and our sibling down south of us by one county. This is absolutely phenomenal. You're doing a great job. So I really appreciate you.
I want to say that it's not me. It's a really fantastic team at the city that you folks have assembled, and at the county and at our local healthcare providers, the doctors, the hospitals have been amazing to work with. We've had locally, we've had nothing but successes for the last 4 or 5 months, and trying to get this rolled out. So thank you for your comments, and I just want us to keep moving toward the finish line, and let's get across that line. And I think we can do it. And I wish I could keep up with 46,000 names of people that want a vaccine, but frankly, everybody wants one, and I don't have one to give them yet.
I appreciate that's a complex task, and it is absolutely a marathon. We're at 5 or 6% or whatever vaccinated, and it is. The effectiveness that we've seen so far is certainly a reflection on our hospital administrators and then the local physicians. So absolutely, hats off to them as well. But keep on keeping on. I appreciate the challenges in front.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. And great presentation, Chief. Thank you so much. We appreciate you.
Okay, thank you, Mayor.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we are going to move on to C, consider the following board appointments. And just for public information, this is something that the council is privileged to do twice a year. We get to meet new people that want to serve the city in a little over 100 opportunities among the different boards and committees we serve. And so it's a great privilege for us. So this time, and as a reminder to the council, we need to do each appointment or each board or committee individually. And so I will make the motion. I'll need someone to make a second, and then we'll vote on each one separately. So let's start with the Airport Advisory Board. And I would like to nominate Jason Rena and Sammy Smith.
I'll make a second.
Okay, moved and seconded. If there's no discussion on that, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that motion passes. The Building Standards Commission, we would like to appoint John Anderson, Michael Bailey, and Rusty Sanders.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. If no further discussion, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Health Code Advisory Board, we would like to appoint Donna Ficus. Need a second, please?
Second.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. If no further discussion, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Historic Landmark Preservation Committee. I'd like to nominate Ann Keenan and Brad Mall.
I'll second.
Okay, moved and seconded. No further discussion. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, Motion passes. Industrial Development Authority, I would like to nominate Robert Flores.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. If no further discussion, all of those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Main Street Advisory Board, I would like to nominate Lynn Myers, Michelle Gott, and Holly Atherton.
Second.
Moved and seconded. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Mayor's Committee on People with Disabilities. We have one opening. I would like to nominate Ann Keenan.
Second.
Moved and seconded. If no further discussion, all of those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Pine Grove Cemetery Board, I'd like to nominate Burgard Patton and Perky Beisel.
Second.
Moved and seconded. If no discussion, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you very much. Now we're going to pick up from our work session, item 3B, receive report, which we did, hold discussion, and give staff direction regarding a list of study strategies to assist in the city planning and economic development efforts. I'd like to ask council, are you ready to ask some questions and have some discussion? Or do you need to look at anything prior to doing that? Any of the slides? No, I'm seeing Amelia saying no. Okay, so Amelia, let's start with you. It's your turn.
Thank you, Mayor. So my main, I don't know if I would call it a concern, but my missing piece to all of these plans is the community engagement aspect of it. I mean, while I understand like some of them, like maybe a terminal area plan or like, you know, a drainage CIP study, those are things like that might be topics or studies that maybe might not elicit or require as much community support and involvement. Things like housing needs study or the downtown master plan, or in general the comprehensive plan, in my view, are things that we should be reaching out to the community about and seeking involvement and engagement and input. And so, you know, I know that there are two different things. One is hiring and paying a consultant to do a study or get expert opinions, but then the other part is coming up with a plan that you want to implement. And I am missing the community engagement piece. I've heard from a few Nacogdoches residents that have echoed the same sentiment. And so I wanted to ask about where that is and how, generally speaking, and this might be a question for a city manager, how generally speaking the community engagement component interacts with the development of a study/plan. Like, do they go hand in hand? Does one come first? How generally that's done, and how you suggest it be done in this case?
Yes, I can answer that question. And so we didn't delve into a lot of the detail of the public engagement part on these various plans, but the comprehensive plan specifically has a huge community engagement component. Personally, I think it's the biggest part because it helps establish that community vision that's derived from that robust public engagement process. And what that does, it one identifies how and where your community wants to grow, specifically for the comprehensive plan, but it also identifies what the community is actually willing to support and get buy-in and consensus. And so without consensus and buy-in, a plan is essentially worthless. So you can't do it without that community engagement process. That's really what's the most expensive and time-consuming part of of that whole plan and study. Also with the downtown master plan, very heavy on the community engagement process. It's a little bit more targeted because it's for a specific area. So it's not that community-wide engagement, which it can include community-wide engagement, but it focuses more directly on the area and those surrounding neighborhoods. And so apologize for not going into more detail on that on the front end, but the public engagement process is one of the most time-consuming and the biggest components of the comprehensive plan. Does that answer your question?
Yes, the
Okay.
only thing that I would say is that I would love to see, I mean, that sounds great, and I'm so glad that's something that you have thought about and worked on. I would like to see more specifics of what that process actually is and what that entails, before moving forward and taking any action, since right now I'm hearing things that I like to hear, but they are very general things
Yes.
about community engagement.
And one of the components of issuing a request for qualifications for a comprehensive plan is we'll first issue a scope of services that will include a public engagement component, and then we'll ask for people to submit their qualifications and experiences, kind of like a resume. And then from that list, we'll ask people to come back and give a more detailed presentation, and they'll have to demonstrate some plans and implementation for what they're going to do as far as that community engagement process. So we'll actually be looking for a consultant who has an expertise in that public engagement process to help us facilitate that third-party facilitation. And that'll be one of the big, I guess, whenever we are evaluating them, we'll have a scoring system, and that public engagement process and their proposal will be a big chunk of that score as far as who we finally select. So the consultant is involved in helping develop that community engagement action plan. Does that make sense? So, and I think Mario has a couple of words he'd like to share as well.
I see some guy looming in a suit behind you.
And a mask guy. Again, keep in mind that we're not asking the councils to spend a penny tonight. What we're asking the council is to give us direction to do the request for qualifications. What I can assure you is that when we bring a contract to council, you will have a fully vetted, almost like a syllabus, if you can imagine, when you took your classes in college, basically the work plan of what that consultant, the recommending consultant that would be bringing forward, what their work plan is to get this thing across the finish line. It'll have expected dates, major milestones, the number of community engagement efforts. And so, again, tonight is really just direction. Do you think we're heading in the right direction? And if so, allowing us to go ahead and prepare the request for qualifications so we can get that solicited into the marketplace, get those requests for qualifications back from those consultants, look at their body of work of what they've done in their past experiences, see what unique community engagement efforts they've done. If that's a major aspect of the council, certainly that'll be that can be weighted heavy on the scoring. And then again, what we would do is bring you back to you a recommended consultant with a fully vetted work plan from start to finish, including the specifics on the community engagement efforts. We're not going to tell you how many are going to participate because we don't know, but we can at least start to estimate when we would have these meetings where and try to again get those details to you. But it's just too soon to tell you how many meetings we're going to have, how we're going to target everyone. We just don't know yet until we actually work with the consultant to figure out what the best practice is.
Okay, so it's kind of done in tandem with the study/plan development and in collaboration with the consultant, as opposed to a separate and apart piece that the city undertakes.
Correct. It has to be fully intertwined. I mean, the last thing you want to have happen is have all these studies happening, and then you're reaching out to the community multiple times, which I certainly don't mind doing, and confusing the public as to what you're meeting about. So if we're going to be since we're doing two studies simultaneously, one is going to be completed sooner than the other. For example, if you allow us to proceed with the downtown master plan, the expectation is as part of the comprehensive plan that consultant attends some of those meetings and hears exactly what's going on specific to downtown, so they're not reinventing the wheel when they're working through the comprehensive plan items, if that makes any sense.
It
So
does make
it
sense.
has to be fully intertwined, but
I understand.
there may be different consultants.
Okay, alrighty, thank you.
Is that all you have?
Yes, Mayor.
Okay, great. Mr. Bolden?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, ma'am. One of my concern is a downtown plan that's both family-friendly and also economical for the city of Nacogdoches. I know I've been to, except for 5 states, I've visited all of the states of the U.S. And it seemed like the ones that opened up their downtown, they kept the integrity of the individual historic structures. All that was preserved. But they opened it as to where it was family friendly to come downtown, and also there was business, especially lawyers' firms, attorneys, that came down and used downtown as businesses. But also that had to open up maybe even like grocery stores or eating places. And I think one of the things it said was, seemed like downtown was closed after 6 o'clock. There was nothing there. That's one of the things that I would like to see worked on, is more activity after business hours in downtown Nacogdoches.
Okay, thank you.
Well, and that would bring up like the need for, as a matter of fact, it states outdoor dining is which one was number 1 on the list. Drugstores, mail and shipping centers, computer and electronic stores, clothing stores. Diverse for families and also for economic value.
Okay. Thank you.
Is that all you have, Mr. Bolden?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Hands?
I appreciate the presentation. I really enjoyed the the ROI presentation 2 weeks ago. That was super helpful, and I can see where some of these are going to serve like that one, where it's essentially a lens that we're looking at to view whether it's the residential needs or the downtown, like how we begin to kind of line that out. Would you mind talking just a little bit about how some of these are absolutely, like Mario said, intertwined, where we need to be doing them in tandem so that it builds on itself, so that as we're working on this much longer, comprehensive dipstick and deep dive with like the comprehensive plan as an example, how it's going to be pretty important to have some of these other pieces, these other lenses in line and ready for that?
Yeah, so the land use fiscal assessment that you guys heard earlier this month really for us helped lay the foundation for some of these future plans, because it put the conversation around density and infill and revitalization in a different lens and monetized it, and so that we can talk about it more from a neutral standpoint, and it takes some of the political stigma out of it, because we're trying to be good good public servants of the funds that are made available to us. And so whenever we're moving forward with these plans, the comprehensive plan is a 30,000-foot level plan. It's meant to be broad, overarching, and then it informs small area plans such as the downtown master plan, such as neighborhood plans, where you're really getting into the weeds of what kind of capital improvement projects do we want to implement to be a catalyst for future development? What kind of updates do we need to make to our development regulations to help streamline some of these processes that we want to see go forward? And so a lot of those stem from the vision that's established in those guiding principles of your overarching comprehensive plan, and then that will let you know if you need to do a deeper dive into these smaller area plans, a deeper dive into the downtown master plan. We already know we need to update the downtown master plans. We don't want to wait on that. So we want to go ahead and move forward, but it's hard to know where you're going unless you know where you are. And so it's important for these plans to stay updated and relevant, otherwise they're not implementable. And so a good comprehensive plan has that implementation strategy, and it could reference 5 or 6 other long-range plans that are updated and evaluated regularly. And so that's kind of how they work together. The comprehensive plan is kind of the umbrella, and then everything stems from that. Does that answer
Absolutely,
your
yeah.
question?
It seems like some of them, while I dream of the sewer and water master plans, that's going to be critical for us to have a decent handle on where we are currently, what we're likely to need based on the data of where the growth is. We need to know that to inform the master plan as well. And same thing like the study we're doing for the fire departments. We need to know those things because those are going to be pretty expensive outlays. And so I just see this tension of us needing to get a lot of these studies done, and it is absolutely expensive. And so the tension is needing to get them done so that we can inform the master plan. And the danger would be that if we just can't allocate the resources for it, then they just end up collecting dust on a shelf somewhere. So I appreciate that tension, and I appreciate the effort in. I know it's kind of a challenging task to set these little races off all at the same time, but I see the need for that.
Yeah, and the key to an effective comprehensive plan is an effective implementation strategy. So what we'll be looking for specifically with this comprehensive plan update is a concrete, effective implementation strategy that allows for incremental implementation, things that we can reasonably achieve over time. It'll have short-term goals and objectives for implementation, and then long-term. Some of them may be capital improvement projects. Some of them may be updates to our regulatory code. Some of them may just be updates to our general policy and programs. And some of those will work together in tangent. And so we'll be looking for that. Yes, this is a great plan. How do we implement that? And how long is it going to take? And who's going to pay for it? Those will all be questions that we'll answer during that process.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Anderson?
Really, I just have comments. Thank you again, as they said, for a really good presentation on that and the previous presentations as well. I just want to say that I absolutely believe agree with the sort of the order of prioritization there on a lot of these consulting related updates on master plans, comprehensive plans. I think a lot of people tend to assume that these things can sort of morph organically over time, and that's how you end up with things that are over 20 years old and not taking into account things like the onset of I-69 and so forth, which are potentially going to make significant changes in Nacogdoches, and we've got to have all of that stuff worked in. So I appreciate your efforts, and I know it is going to be a large task moving forward with all of these, but thank you, and I'm very much in favor of it.
Thank you.
Okay, great. So I think this was a very good, I like the succinctness of this follow-up presentation. I think you did a great job with that. I especially like that you mentioned the difficult aspects of these plans with relationship to implementation and the financial viability, because that's really the hardest part, I think. It's not the longest part, but it can be the most difficult part. And actually, once you start talking about these things, it builds a great amount of momentum. And so for us moving forward and to see the possibilities when the public starts talking about it. And so this is a really exciting time. So I didn't hear anything from council to discourage the moving forward. And so I think we're all okay to proceed, and for you all to create the RFQs and get the RFPs and get that going for this part that we see. Did I misunderstand anyone? Is everyone on the council ready to allow them to go to the next steps? Okay. Any other questions, follow-up or discussion about any item?
All right. Well, thank you so much, and we look forward to bringing these items back to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elena. Okay, that concludes our meeting for January 19th of 2021. And thank you all for attending, and meeting is now adjourned.